Good evening. This is Peter Colla with Spiritual Therapies with Dr. Peter and Anna Colla. And today is November 12th. If you saw my show from yesterday, which is the launch of the new book, Hunting Fields, it was supposed to go out on 11/11, but because of YouTube delays, it had to go out had to go out today, but it was still recorded on 11/11. Anyways, today's show, we will continue and we will be reading chapter 3. And I will continue every day, a chapter a day, until it is finished. Some days I might do 2. We'll see how it goes. Depends on my reader. As I hope you enjoyed the Hooded Vigilante. He did manage to come, and he will be here again today for today's performance. Before we get started, I would like to comment on, I did go to an evening party tonight with a Thanksgiving, a Friendsgiving. It was very nice. And it allowed me to talk to some people again about some of the issues that I have spoken about in the past, mainly about some of the misgivings that are perpetrated by our medical society against people, telling them certain things that they think are for their good, and it actually seems to be detrimental. That is treating symptoms and not the causes of injuries. I would just like to say that in my 35 years of treating and finding out the truths about healthcare, if you find yourself in need of rehabilitation, as this young lady did, and you've survived the attack, that means you have overcome the attack and now you are on the rehabilitation side. The easiest and most effective manner of therapeutic exercise that anybody can do is get in the water. And when I say that, the water is the most perfect molecule created by God to help mankind. Our bodies are primarily made up of water. Water has the ability to conduct the intent of people, intent of the user, through the water and into our body. This has been proven by Masaru Mudo. You only have to look at some of my other readings and writings to see that. I'm not going to get into it now, but if you go in, if you've got an issue and you go and decide you want to try to rehabilitate yourself, get your butt in the water, and you will find when you bless that water, when you get in, and all you have to do is say, bless this water in the name of Jesus, or help my body, or create a better effect on my skin, cleanse my skin, whatever your purpose is, make me stronger, reduce my pain, whatever, reduce the pain that I am sensing, and it will be done. If you want to know more about this, you can contact me. As for what's going on in the public right now, we know that the election was stolen again, but we know that this time they have everything, and they had to let the criminals go and do these things. They had to let the last snakes lift their heads out of the snake holes so that they could catch them in the act. Won't be long, no, brothers and sisters, before they'll be rounded up and we can get on to real business, millennia business. So spend your time looking for truths. Spend your time searching. And where the heart is, there your treasures will be also. That's what we need to do. And if you're more than 51% searching for truths, searching for and sharing truths, talking about truths, contemplating God's things, contemplating love things for your family, blessings, you are spending the majority of your time in the spiritual realm, and that is how you ascend. And when you spend more than 51% of your time in the spirit realm, God opens the doors to more truths, as he has done with me. So without further ado, I leave you, and I will close this video, and the next you will be hearing from is chapter 3 of Hunting Fields. Enjoy. Good evening. I am the Hooded Vigilante. At least that's the role I'm playing recently. Chapter 3, Hunting Fields. Epilogue to Bliss. When we understand all the images we are seeing are mere constructs to direct us into a planned and predictable direction, we come to the realization we are watching a program, like a theater, whose outcome the script has already been plotted. And we merely get the pleasure or the displeasure of watching it play out. That is, if we are not already part of the cast. It was to be the war to end all wars, pit one side against the other with one common purpose, that is to destroy the final fabric of the people's spirits, where the acceptance of anything other than the melancholy existence of destitute and horror associated with war is worth the sacrifice regardless of how many liberties are lost. There should be but one common call among seemingly all the people of the earth that remain, and the horrors and all the needless killings. 1944. Sounds of screaming and the muffled sounds of men's voices yelling orders that are drowned out by the distant bomb explosions. Considering the time and the war, rumbles cannot be mistaken for the thunder, but given the impending doom that lingers and the images of artillery fire that can only announce the eventual approaches of enemy troops, American, if they are lucky, or worse, Russian troops, doom seems to be on the doorsteps. Fear interweaves its cold fingers around the neck of the doctor. His momentary eye-wide consideration as his raspy breath betrays his unusual calm Western cigarette clenched between his teeth as he silently mouths the hatred he has for these vermin. Inside an old brick medical hospital, now turned into an extension of a prison, a German officer draped loosely in a white lab coat rushes frantically through boxes of files and table drawers, tossing handfuls of paper and other materials in a makeshift burn barrel in front of him. For a moment, he looks at his outstretched hands, even as he considers the writings on the pages before him. Only months ago, he was receiving such an acclamates for the cutting-edge drugs his research had already birthed. He remembers days ago when he was sitting in the office staring at the very papers displayed up across the corkboard in front of him. His eager young son looks at the calculations and the lines connecting the calculations, even as he himself tries to take hold of the images in his head. His attempts to explain to his son, his only visible protege, he ponders as the problems were no more clear to him than they were a day ago today. The concept of mixing blood within the predicted powers of bloodline hybrid genetic seeding into the astrological dark angelic prophecies written among the writings of his Masonic secret texts, while predictable, even rudimentary in their separate sectors of study, it is when he tries to combine them that understanding these same equations again starts to suddenly elude him. This should not be so difficult, and perhaps it is the strain of the war and the ridiculous thundering in a distance that is scrambling his once focused mind. I've been working too hard, he reaches up and briefly rubs his own forehead as the pain of the headache suddenly strikes behind his eyes. Such an opportunity to have such access to so many experimental volunteers the war provides may never come again and seems to be coming to an abrupt end. He smiles to himself as he contemplates the word volunteers. He examines the hundreds of blood sample tubes, stacked trays after tray on top of each other. His face displays the sadness of the waste that the secret so many samples yet hold must now be deposited in the fire. Toss them all as well as the rest into the cooler. We can't take any of them, he says as he shoves the trays towards the waiting guard. Other aides and soldiers run in and out carrying boxes of materials the commander points to, following orders almost unspoken and merely gestured with a wave or a pointing of his gloved hand, which is to be discarded, which are to be offered to the meek pile of the remains on the leather attaché case on the chair. Heinrich Mendele, the first cousin removed from his father's side of the famous Joseph Mendele, the angel of death, smiles as he thinks of the cousin probably now captive as Poland has already fallen into the hands of those Russian dogs. He prefers his mother's bloodline that he has traced all the way back to Frederick the Great, making him royalty. But he decided not to press that issue, especially when Hitler decided to make a political war against the royals of Germany. Not that anyone ever was arrested. He pulls out the small file out of his own family of origins and written orders, glancing for a moment to the fire as he tosses them himself onto the pile now assembling at his feet. He does prefer the name the Angel of Blood, even though the blood has only been an area of prompting study recently. Berlin's obsession with finding a synthesized version of adrenaline enhanced blood, their solution to their super soldier enhancement, and winning the already failing war. The red pills have proven to be quite adequate in enhancing strength, and even a few unexpected side effects when certain ritual augmentations are added. His many jars of animals mixed with human hybrids clearly displays this truth. Much more enhancements are only a breath away from discovery. Yet the benefit of the medical implementation has only limited effects, and while this limitation, as well as the deadly side effect if one was to run out or stops, it keeps the recipient tied to the source, making control possible. It is nowhere near breeds the desired effects of producing the real docile giant. How many times did he try to convince them of the necessity of creating super soldiers from birth and the foolishness of trying to even extract adrenalized blood from dead soldiers? The host must be alive for the life-saving energies to be passed on, otherwise only more death is realized. You would think, with their knowledge of the dark arts and the source information from the Book of the Giants, they would know the laws of death and sacrifices. The now sweating officer works frantically and relentlessly, moving his samples from the files and looking at them, identifying the ones he needs and others he could toss into the burning barrel, right in the middle of the lab, flames almost igniting the ceiling above. The few onlookers are still strapped to the table, stare on in masked, wide-eyed fear, bottles hanging near, extracting blood in place of giving treatments. Normally cutting into these women with surgical precision makes sure to silence the nerve at just the right angle to maximize the pain away from and render the greatest result. Unfortunately for these, he will not have the time to gift them his skills. He puts out star charts, rolls them, and their corresponding codes he has placed on them, too large to even think about bringing, let alone the volumes of genetic record lineages and the historic birth records pages with reds, the names corresponding with samples, toss them into fires, bottles, and most importantly, the photographs. They must go. All these priceless documents, the products of endless hours, records from research, genetic references, and vital records collected from livestock, as well as the nobility, including these which he knows he descends from every corner of Europe and beyond, all needed to be thrown in the fires, and quickly. He can't even think these might fall into the hands of the sympathizers looking for the records of the dead. He walks over and picks up another box, carrying it quickly to the table by the fire. All his painstaking experiments on the unwilling volunteer animals necessary for his work, what a waste. He could only occasionally squeeze in his primary objective to discover the hidden genetic combination, animal, royal, with mystical, to final produce his own star seeds. Now everything is being tossed in the fire. He can't help keep everything, but most of these documents point too many fingers to the many deaths that he himself ushered in for the purpose of finding the perfect combination of genetic altering combinations. The same lab he's only days, weeks, months before experimented on genetic parts of Jewish women, girls, babies, even boys, went on with not even the least of diversions, only the wailing moans of many bodies being disemboweled alive and awake, their screams still echo in his ears as the memories of the torches bring the crooked smile across his face and his lips. Doctor stands above the flames of the burning barrels, coughing in spasms, but still holds the rare cigarette tightly between his teeth, coughing not from the smoke as much from the darkness he swallows constantly with every breath. The only thing choking him at this moment is the thought of undiscovered information being burned as he tosses the papers in, staring into them with longing almost to pull their hidden messages out of the flames or step in himself. Something deep in him knows that in these flames are the only sense of peace he will ever feel. His gloved hand almost drawn to them as he is in a trance and reaches towards to lower it into the lover's grip in a desperate cry to embrace the burning papers, pull him away at one last goodbye. The smile is quickly turned to an angry frown as he tosses more of the work into the fire. The larger fires outside in the yard are reserved for the samples in the jars, as well as the piles of body they have yet to bury. The mutated organs of still unborn abilities, twisted apparitions as the fruits of the experiments take shape. If he only had more time, his numbers were never quite right. His work to create a super soldier was groundbreaking. When he realized that adding intense emotional experiences to the births could have a dark effect on the offspring and their secretions, much more evident than only the dark rituals of the past, coupled with what he has discovered in his astrological studies, and the possibilities seemed almost unfathomable. Of course, he knew it was no secret, the power of frightening blood and its effect on elite troops that brought his Fuhrer nearly to the doorstep of world domination. But he also knew that there was much more still out there to find. A young soldier hurries up to him, grasping his arms, 6 or more jars for the doctor to examine. You fool, those go out into the large fires outside. The doctor almost spins as he contemplates for a moment pulling his pistol from his holster and shooting the young boy in the face. He pulls his hand back from the pistol. No, better not. Who would carry the rest of these samples out to the fire? Even these regular soldiers were such idiots, young or incompetent, not intellectual purebloods like he had requested. But his cousin, Dr. Death, regardless of his pull, said the Reich could not spare any of his elite forces for such obscure experiments, especially when it came to the Jewish work camps. The fool never understood the true nature and power of what he was trying to achieve in his work, nor the essence that seemed inherent in the blood of many of the Jewish livestock possessed, a key to unlock the very mystery of so many people, and then bring them under control to whatever held that key. So here he was in this obscure corner of the war, shuffling papers and contemplating his own demise as he throws the last of his precious writings into the fire. Little matter. The majority of its value still remains in his own head. Hopefully soon he will continue his work in another land, away from prying eyes. The young lad looks at him as he works, often in confusion with a face of lust and disgust. This inner time bomb he has learned to use and exploit. And now the soldier assistant only has a scared look on his face as he peers down into the misformed objects, many looking like babies still gripping their umbilical cords, but more misshapen and grotesque like animals than human. Some with wings or scales, or with feet like goats, some without eyes or mouths. A few look more like animals than human, or even insects. A boy snaps his head as the soldier takes over, turns quickly on the command of the SS officer, a colonel, but that rank is hidden by the blood-stained white coat haphazardly draped over him, and suddenly one of the jars slips out of his grip and crashes on the floor. You idiot. If I had more time, I'd stick your head in one of those jars. Get out of here and take the rest of those things out in the yard to burn, the colonel says. He bends down to gently embrace the creature, the now slightly moving in the scattered glass jar. The creature was misformed with the oversized front cranial, jagged, misshapen fang teeth jutting out from its oversized mouth that somehow might be mistaken as a mouth. That and the long claws coming out from what looks like baby arms still moves with obvious life as the creature slightly convulses even the least. I wish I could take you with me. A few blood samples and papers are one thing, but a live sample, they would never let me in, he said affectionately to one of the more successful splicings between animal and the sons of men that have managed to be produced. He turned and placed the now squirming creature into the flames of the small burning cylinder in his lab. It shrieks and screams with an amplitude of strength that surprises even him. That one almost clawed its weight out of the womb, killing the screaming mother right before his eye. How could he, the Fuhrer, just disregard his program and other work? Its work destroyed, ordered destroyed, especially when he looked at the gasping creature, still not completely dead after months in a jar, squirming in the fire. He always knew if he could find the right combination of darkness, pain, torture, and combine it with pure light and the right birth chart, the offspring might actually live and grow into his dream to bring back the Nephilim of old. But the war is over and his work must go on. He throws another of the remaining screeching creatures into the fire as he turns away with a rare tear in his eye. Stepping back up to his papers, he tosses the entire boxes into the flame, taking only the ones he knows are what he seeks, bloodlines of the most viable candidates who have ever been somewhat of success. He is so desperately fanning through the boxes of files, sweat is now pouring down his brow as he pulls the last cabinet open and takes out the earliest files, most being discarded into the flames without hardly looking at them. The bloodlines of the true rulers of the world, of which he knows he was born, grant him not only access to these powers, but the right to dominate in any way he sees fit over the rest of this livestock that happens to share this world with him. Finally, his leather notebook appears. With glee, he grabs all the papers and stuffs them into the already overflowing briefcase and the small box below. He shoves the last desk drawer closed and turns to leave as he sees the back door coming from deep inside the hospital to his lab open with the kick from dark SS troops. A small band of soldiers dressed in black with a special emblem on their shoulder, the triangular shaped A with one red eye in the middle. A special assassin squad march up to the last few wide-eyed women strapped and gagged on the table. Just as fast shoot each of them in the head as they screech and almost sever their own wrists trying to pull away in a spasm of fear. The guard quickly bundles the bodies and tosses them into wheelbarrows, and hands haul out to the fire, now well over a height of the windows outside. The doctor stands back at the barrel. The fire dances images of heat and flames red across his face as he stares into the flames. The horrific screech and death and splatter as the blood from the bullets manages to spray the room. The blood splatters set on the now smirking smile across the doctor's jester-like face as he pauses just for a moment to watch the show flashes reflect in his eyes. They are his own dances with insanity. For a moment, his anger perhaps spanning his entire life, at the very least during the burning, is replaced with the pleasure of feeling the blood hit his face. He could describe that feeling with only one momentary word: bliss. We are taught to let the people who seem to have the most knowledge lead. Yet where do they seem to be leading us? Apparently to an outcome that benefits the few, not the many, and certainly not into utopia. So what is left? The surviving disheartened must ask, at the very least, what is the cost with its semblance of servitude in exchange for peace? Yet sometimes speculation of destitute, along with the regression of the spirits of men within, arises an essential force among the few individuals that is greater than the need to do only what is necessary to save a life, but more importantly, a drive, as in this case, an absolute need to do what is right. Not only what's right for an individual or even an entire country, but what is right for all men. This becomes a sovereign quest to lift up heads even in the midst of death, proclaiming the time and resistance to do what they must for the common good of all men, regardless of what side of the political line, national boundary, or religious veil a person finds himself on. It is in such a time and with such promptings that seeds of true faith are sown, or so I've been told. That is chapter 3. Tomorrow, I will be back to read chapter 4. Blessings.